welcome to another episode of Something Witchy, a Sabrina the Teenage Witch rewatch podcast. Today, we're tackling part 2 of Skye's history of magic in media in the 1900s, picking up from the 80s and going on towards the 2000s. Are we going to get into the 2000s?
Just before the 2000s.
All right, so just before the millennium. I am super excited to hear this next half of the episode and where we're going to go from here.
Should we go into the 1980s? Are we ready?
Yes.
The 1980s, we're in full satanic panic. There's obviously a lot of cultural anxiety. There's a lot of increased crimes. You have a lot more of your serial killers during this time. There's that sense of stranger danger. And there's actually a lot of misunderstood diseases at that time that are also helping contribute to this, collective unconsciousness of something's going on. And of course, it probably has to be the occult. So, Canada.
Oh, Canada.
likes to claim that they started the Satanic Panic.
I mean, is that something you should like to claim? Is that something you should be fighting for?
I feel like most Canadians aren't claiming it.
Okay.
But there is a claim that it originated in Canada. And that is because of the book Michelle Remembers by Dr. Larry Pasdar. And in this book, Dr. Pasdar writes about his patient, Michelle Smith, who seeks treatment after a miscarriage. Michelle went under the now discredited practice of memory recovery therapy. The book recounts those sessions and was published under the tagline of The Shocking True Story of the Ultimate Evil, a Child's Possession by the Devil. That child was Smith, and her nightmare began at the age of 5. It was then Smith claims that her mother gave her away to a satanic cult. For 14 months, she would be held captive and tortured, witnessing ritual murders and mutilations, many involving babies. The public gobbled it up like so many cannibalized corpses.
Oh, gosh.
I didn't write the synopsis.
We need to get through one episode of talking about cannibalism.
And as book sales took off, its authors became regular fixtures on TV, appearing on everything from Oprah to CBC's Midday. And Pasdar and Smith were quickly established as authorities in satanic ritual abuse. And psychiatrists and members of law enforcement would actually turn to them as experts on this brand new subject.
So I actually do have something to add to this. And it's kind of interesting that this book kind of kicked off the Satanic Panic fear of cults, which, I mean, you should be afraid of cults. It's interesting that this happened because, so there's another podcast I listened to called Was I in a Cult? And it's not for everybody. They talk to cult survivors and they do it in kind of a humorous, joking way, which can rub some people the wrong way, but it works for me. And one of their episodes, they actually talked to a woman whose mother was deep in a cult that sprang from this novel and from this movement of this like repressed memory hypnotherapy stuff. And she talks about how deep her mom got into it, and the woman who was the quote-unquote therapist was the cult leader, did all the normal cult leader things about, limiting outside contact, demanding money, requiring them to be in these like super long, intense quote therapy sessions, demanding her more and more to create false memories. So it's wild that something that came out to be so anti-cult and anti-witchcraft actually in turn ended up creating cults.
And there's actually a documentary that was released in 2023 called Satan Wants You that goes over this whole book and Dr. Larry Pasdar and his practices and Michelle Smith there. It won several awards, so it's definitely going on my list to watch.
Interesting.
So that's Canada's claim to starting the hysteria.
Congratulations, Canada.
But along with the items I mentioned previously about the time, you also had women returning to the workforce as well, dual income houses, children needing to go to daycare, and there were quite a few daycare abuse cases in the early 1980s as well, sort of also feeding into this panic, especially by the mothers.
Well, I mean, it was also the era of latchkey kids where you had your elementary and up age school children going home and being alone for a couple of hours while parents finished up work and being completely unsupervised.
And was accused, just so many fingers pointing at what could have.
Those poor nerds just catching strays.
Yep. You've also had a buildup over the past 2 decades of just more and more media that's demonic, Satanism is out there, all that stuff. And then find a time where you can point the finger at the occult.
It's so disheartening but also in some way comforting how repetitive and circular history is. Because we know the pendulum's always going to swing back. But it's this idea of like, oh, our children are at home, they're outside of our care, they're doing whatever, they're playing D&D, they're getting sucked into witchcraft, they're out in the woods worshiping Satan. And today it's, or our children are outside of our care, they're getting sex change operations at school. They're turning gay because they're reading the wrong books. Like it's always the same circular logic based in fear. And it's wild how powerful of an emotion fear is.
It'll be interesting to see if humanity as a whole can ever break out of that cycle, or if it's just a cycle sort of doomed to continue because of human nature.
I mean, I think it's just how we are, and I think it'll just take, I mean, I'm glad that we've at least moved away from the supernatural. I will go with that. But I think it's just always going to take on different faces, and I think this is how progress is made, is there always has to be a push backwards before you can move it forward. Again, it's rough in the meantime when you're in that backward moment, and it's hard being the ones that have to push it forward, but it will push forward again.
So yeah, in the 1980s, the horror films still continue. I mean, they're gonna capitalize from this moment as well. Books still continue.
When is The Exorcist? Isn't that around 70s, 80s?
Yes.
What's the other one? Poltergeist is around all that supernatural. I know it's not witches, but it's the same.
Yeah, The Exorcist was in 1973, so just continuing to lead up to build the fire underneath.
Yeah.
So 1983, I haven't read this book, so I don't know if it's actually positive, but it is a children's book. So you have The Witches by Roald Dahl, which is still portraying witches as antagonistic and child-hating, so I'm not sure where it lies.
I don't think it's a positive. Granted, it's been a long time since I've read it, but they also did have that movie come out recently, which I did not watch, which I wanted to. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a positive depiction of witches.
Yeah, no, positive not in light of witches there, but like we have a children's book still coming out.
Yeah.
Featuring witches. Children are actually reading it despite everything.
I mean, listeners can weigh in on this, but I've heard more than one person say that the witch's scar has scarred them. I mean, that's like all of Roald Dahl's books. They're a little terrifying.
I don't think I've actually yet to read a book of his, not gonna lie.
But you know, like the premise of like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, James and the Giant Peach, Willy Wonka.
James and the Giant Peach. I saw that as an adult and I was terrified. Like, they're just they're a little off.
But we're going to jump to 1987, where Elizabeth Lloyd wrote the book Witch Child. Now, these book covers, there was another one called Witch Daughter that would come out in 1988. And these books just have some of the funnest covers. Just your traditional, like, silly, stereotypical witch, wart on the nose, all that. Okay,
I got really excited because Witch Child is the name of a book that I love, written in 2000 by Celia Reese. That I got really excited. But I was like, I don't think it's from the 80s.
Sorry, this is probably not what you love. So this book is depressing.
Okay.
But it is the fictional diary of a young woman's account of her life in a small colonial town during the height of the witch trials. The horror comes when you read her story and see how it was for anyone to be labeled a witch and the horrible fate that befell most of them. And the horrible fate does befall her as well, but you get this book recognizing the humanity and the, pointing fingers hysteria of it all, calling out that mass hysteria and the ease of which it is to accuse someone.
It is also like one of those moments where you have to remember, like, it's from people who are scared. They're scared of differences. They're scared of the unknown. They're scared of their own lives and what's happening. And it's so hard to, like, again, even today, try to have empathy or talk to these people. They're acting out as scared animals.
Agreed.
And how do you break through that primal emotion? Because going back to Sabrina, who wouldn't want to be friends with a witch? And then you could have a pizza party or a taco party or whatever kind of food party you wanted.
Right. 1988, we get one of my favorite films growing up, that of Willow.
Aww.
Starring Warwick Davis and the very recently late Val Kilmer there. Here you have, Warwick Davis playing Willow, and he's an aspiring magician who teams up to protect the baby princess from an evil queen who is then the dark sorceress. So you have both sides of the coin there. And you have the brownies steal the baby.
I really want you to leave it in where it says both sides of the corn.
I said coin.
You corrected it. You said corn first.
Oh, okay.
No, I love Willow. And but again, it's interesting that the female character is the one that's the negative magical. The male character is the positive magical.
Very true. Well, in 1989, we're going to get one of the most wholesome things we can get out of the 1980s, which is Kiki's Delivery Service. No negativity towards witches. The young protagonist is the witch, along with a black cat familiar. Just a fun time.
It's so cute.
Rounding off 1989, we have a TV series that I think is going to sound pretty familiar and does get attributed a bit for kicking off the 90s and the more accepting view of witches in media. Sorry, this is a film, not a TV series. And that is Teen Witch. Which the plot might sound actually pretty familiar here, because it follows Louise, a teenage girl, who discovers she is a witch and gains powers on her 16th birthday. It was originally pitched as a female version of Teen Wolf, which Teen Wolf was 1985, and then it was later reworked into a standalone spin-off film of its own. I haven't watched this one. Sounds fun, though. It features numerous impromptu musical numbers, including rap sequences.
Oh, no.
And is considered a cult classic.
All right, maybe that goes on the list for not this break, but when we need another break.
And it's popular for its music and 1980s fashion nostalgia.
Oh, okay, I'm sold. 100%.
And now we're into the 1990s, where you're still going to see your hints of all the things we've talked about. Still the horror movies, still pointing, to Satan and the devil and the occult. But you also have what I've called in my subheader, Bring on the Teens. I feel like 90s is very youth-based, teenage, fun. It becomes this era that's really dominated by teen culture. And then witchcraft gets dominated by teen culture as well.
I think what we saw in the 90s that we maybe didn't see in earlier decades is teens as a marketing category. Teens with disposable income from side jobs, babysitting, whereas child labor was the bad. That wasn't such a thing. So now all of a sudden teens are being marketed towards.
You also have this new age movement and third wave feminism coming through as well.
What wave of feminism are we on now? Like the 29th?
Who knows? So kicking off in 1990 to start, we get Good Omens, the nice and accurate predictions of Agnes Nutter, which we'll just say is by Terry Pratchett alone. We see that instead of witches being pagan devil worshippers, we have Agnes, who isn't actually alive for the book, but her predictions help her witch descendant, Anathema Device, work with the angels and play a vital role in saving the world from Armageddon. So we have witches and angels instead of witches and devils.
I mean, I haven't read the books. I've only seen the series, but isn't there also demons in it?
There's demons, but the witches are working with the angels.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
1993. And I feel like the 90s were seeing and sort of embracing the maiden archetype. But in 1993, we get Double Toil and Trouble, the TV movie starring the Olsen twins as young twin witches with magic powers. And they're the only ones who can stop their evil great aunt's curse.
I love it. Okay.
In 1993, we also get Hocus Pocus, which is more of that stereotypical haggish, children-hating, evil witch type of movie.
But also just so good.
So good, and yes, they're the villains, but also they're just extremely silly and hard to take serious.
They're amazing. I love that movie.
1994, we get Thumbelina, the film, which is based on the story by Hans Christian Andersen, and that is a friendly witch helping the lonely widow have her daughter, which is as tiny as her thumb, thus the name.
I was really confused where the witch took place in the at the beginning. Okay.
Yes. Also in 1994, keeping up with the animated films, we get The Swan Princess, Dark Witch there.
I mean, Swan Princess was also a ballet long before that.
True. Does the film have Jean Bob the Frog?
No, the ballet does not, no.
1995, And then 97 and 2000, Philip Pullman is going to release his Dark Materials series. And it features a large group of witches who work on the protagonist sides rather than as singular villains. Now, there's not a lot of content with them there, but it is noteworthy that he depicts them as a unique culture rather than as integrated part of that mainstream culture, a fringe group of a few traders. And he does bring up the possibility of male witches in the books as well. 1996, we have Sabrina the Teenage Witch TV series. I believe we'll go over the movie next episode or in a couple episodes there, so we won't really talk about it here. If you don't know what Sabrina's about, welcome to our podcast.
You're listening out of order.
Yes. Have a couple more here. Past Sabrina we'll highlight just to get us to about 2000 to show how the 90s really embraced witches there and the idea of witches. In 1996, we have the movie The Craft, which is more teenage witches, both functioning in good and bad roles. Another cult classic. 1997, we'll have the premiere of my favorite show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where we'll see several witches, both good and evil, and one of the main characters being a witch, that of Willow Rosenberg. Also in 1997, we have the release of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, written by an anonymous person. It just appeared into the world there.
I'm pretty sure I've said her name on the podcast before, because I keep asking if she's ripping off Sabrina.
Oh, you probably have. I've tried to say she who must not be named. But here, obviously, you see young witches and wizards, good and evil, huge turning point, especially in literature and children, reading stories about witches and wizards.
And we still had the backlash against those books, too, as anti-Christian, satanic.
Yeah.
It gained momentum, I think, a little bit more towards when the movies started being talked about. Like, I would say early 2000s was, I think, when it hit the zeitgeist even more. Yeah, I'm sick. I can't talk. But again, we still had that stupid
backlash.
It's satanic. It's witchcraft. It's evil. No, it's just really bad Latin.
1998, Disney jumps on the witch train again with Halloween Town, one of my favorite October watches.
So I'm going to tell you something that might offend people, but I didn't know that they switched the actress for Halloween Town High.
Marnie.
I didn't know that it was a different Marnie.
They did a pretty good job of casting very similar, I feel like.
I just figured she was older. I just found that out a matter of weeks ago. But I love the Halloween Town series.
Thank you, Disney, for that.
Mm-hmm.
1998, we also get the TV series Charmed kicking off, and that will run through 2006 and is beloved by many.
Didn't Charmed come back for a hot second?
I think so. 1998 was a big year for the witches, because with Halloween Town Charmed, we also got the film Practical Magic, starring Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. And we get the first major appearance for Hilary Duff as Wendy the Good Witch in Casper Meets Wendy.
Yep, I forgot about that one.
And we go on into the 2000s and this current decade where, it seems like over time the definition of a witch has become just a woman with magical powers, and we've, for the most part, released these shackles of Satanism, all the negative aspects. Obviously, you still have your horror movies, and they're fun, but it's not the predominant view we have of witches in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, that was in me. One of my questions was the definition between a witch and versus a woman with magic is real fuzzy, especially in today's day and age with the amount of fantasy novels directed towards women and young women, where there are all these elaborate worlds where there's just women who have magical powers, but they're not referred to as witches or sorceresses or anything. It's just what they are.
Yeah, it's sort of that same blurry line as, the fairy we discussed earlier. It's also interesting, we've been able to move away from this predominant thinking of witchcraft equals Satanism, but you look at Netflix's The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and that fully embraces the Satanism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to see now they're comfortable enough to create that and make that.
Although I don't necessarily hold that up as a high quality piece of media.
It has its problems. It has offended many people from all sides of the aisles.
I feel like the first couple seasons were really good, and then it kind of went off the rails.
Agreed.
I mean, I have so many questions and thoughts, but I feel like, and we can probably definitely do it like a 2000s to 2020s at a later date if you wanted to. Or we could do it old school, like in 1800s.
Let's go back to Macbeth.
Oh gosh. I mean, the first witches, I mean, I'm sure there's some in like Sumerian mythology. I just don't know any Sumerian mythology, but there's definitely witches in Greek mythology. And
yeah, with the idea of the triple goddess originating from there, you have Hecate, you have Hinduism, you have the Slavs, like everywhere around the world, you have the idea, at least, of the triple deity, which has then become associated with witches. History. Spaniel.
Like I said, it's just interesting that it's been this recurring theme of a woman with power. And that is a terrifying thought to so many, civilizations and groups of people.
It is interesting going back to ancient times where a woman of power, that triple goddess was revered. And at what point, I guess, when paganism was being crushed, did the tables turn?
You can say like goddesses can still be revered and women can still be oppressed. Like, I don't think the revering of a goddess necessarily means that women were treated as equals or even held higher. I mean, the fact that in history, matriarchal societies are so rare.
That's valid. I think I was looking at it less of the actual women and more of like the stories and the power through tale there. You're looking at the depressing side.
I know, I'm so sorry.
Looking at it got crushed by Christianity, so still quasi-depressing.
I mean, still depressing. Different depressing.
Depressing as far as practices and traditions and beliefs.
Moral of the story, we should all become witches. If there are real witches out there, we would like to be your friend and have a pizza party. We will accept you for who you are.
I mean, I think the practices in Wicca make a lot of sense. It's just respecting the earth. There's forms still be continuing on, and will continue on despite this world and the shitty things we do to each other in it.
I'm not happy now. No. We need something happier to end on.
We got really retrospective there.
I mean, it's hard to talk about this history of witchcraft, which is in so many ways women's history, without reflecting on all the negative. But I do think it is good that there have been such strides and that we are at a point in society where accusing someone of witchcraft is more likely to get you locked up in the loony bin than the person you're accusing of witchcraft.
You're going to be Olivia and end up in the stocks instead of Sabrina.
Yeah. I mean, so for all the days we look and wonder how much progress has actually been made, like at least there's been that progress.
And this is all very much from a Western point of view.
Yeah.
Note that as well.
Western American.
Very American, some European influences there, but I mean, different part of the world's still accuse people of being witches. I made it depressing again.
So you know how like people are like, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't tell anybody, but there would be signs and they like talk about the things that they would buy. So if you suddenly came into magical powers and you couldn't tell anybody, but there would be signs, what would some of those signs be?
I would just be suddenly wealthy enough to travel, find all those good deals. I would be wandering around the Scottish Highlands for quite a bit and other parts of the world. And then I would be using that witchy side of connecting to nature because I just want to travel and see the things. What about you?
I would never be late for anything.
Ooh. Didn't realize you were frequently late to things.
I mean, I've gotten better as I've gotten older, but there was definitely a point in time where my sister would lie to me and tell me things started a half hour earlier than they actually did.
Oh, wow, you were that bad.
I mean, it wasn't always a half hour, but 15, 20 minutes. Not anything like where we had tickets, but although I would definitely cut it closer than she would like.
Well, that covers what I found. Like I said, it's a very small fraction, especially since it's just Western culture and media there. But y'all have any other good crazy book titles from 50s or 70s there? Throw them out. Or any other major ones we missed. Didn't go over Blair Witch Project, but maybe if we do 2000s to current age, that sort of kicked off the 2000s, I'd say. Let us know. Hopefully you liked the facts and the discussions and aren't too depressed. And we'll be back later with some more happy things when we go over the movie.
Yeah, I thought this was super fun and informational, and it definitely helps put a different lens into what we're watching. Even though it is just a fun, silly teen show, it is nice to know the history that allowed it to be made in the first place and why it's like a weirdly important piece of media for being a teen sitcom.
Silly little show, but in the picture of things has some importance to it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's been our episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Skye, for taking the reins on this one so I could sit back and just cough my lungs out.
No problem.
Until next time.
Stay magical.